The ropes cut deep into my wrists as I hung against the wooden fence. My father had tied me there like I was nothing more than an animal. The sun burned my skin by day, and the cold bit into my bones by night. For 3 long days, I had not tasted food or water. My lips cracked, my stomach screamed, and I felt my life slipping away. I was only a young girl, but I could already smell death wrapping itself around me. My father's shadow still haunted my eyes as I remembered the last thing he said before walking away. "You don't deserve to live." I thought that was the end. But on the 4th day, when I could no longer lift my head, I heard footsteps. They were soft at first, like whispers against the dry earth. I blinked, thinking I was imagining things. Then I saw him, a stranger, tall and kind-eyed, staring at me with shock written all over his face. He rushed forward, his hands trembling as he reached for the ropes. In that moment, I realized something powerful. Maybe life wasn't finished with me yet. But just as his hands touched the ropes, we both heard another set of footsteps coming. Heavy, angry. My father was returning. Before all of this, before the fence, before the hunger and the ropes, I lived a life that was not easy but still had a spark of hope. My name is Grace. I grew up in a small village with dusty roads, tall trees, and people who knew everyone's business. My father, Henry, was known as a strict and bitter man. He carried anger in his eyes the way some men carried laughter. My mother, Alice, was soft-spoken, but she was too weak to stop his cruelty. When I was little, I thought all fathers were like mine, cold, harsh, and quick to raise their hand. I learned to stay quiet, to move carefully, to avoid his anger. But no matter how careful I was, trouble always found me. Sometimes it was for spilling a little food, sometimes for walking too slowly, and sometimes for reasons I didn't even understand. One day, I had dared to speak up. I remember it clearly because it was the day everything changed. He was shouting at my mother, blaming her for not cooking fast enough, and something inside me burned. I shouted back at him. "Stop hurting her." I cried. For the first time, I saw shock on his face. He didn't expect me to fight back. But that shock quickly turned to fury. He dragged me outside, his grip like iron on my arm. Neighbors peeked through their windows but said nothing. No one ever dared to challenge my father. He pulled me to the fence behind our house, grabbed some ropes, and tied me there. I thought it would be just another punishment, maybe for an hour or two. But hours turned into a day, then another, and another. My mother cried silently from the doorway, but she never dared to untie me. At first I screamed. I called out to her, to anyone who could hear. But my voice grew weak. The sun rose and set, and I began to feel my body giving up. The world blurred around me. That's when I realized my father truly meant to leave me there to die. The second day was worse than the first. Flies swarmed my face, and I couldn't swat them away. My throat was so dry it hurt to breathe. My head spun with memories of the times I dreamed of going to school, of laughing with other children, of having a normal life. But my dreams felt far away, fading with every passing hour. On the 3rd night, I saw stars overhead. I whispered to them, asking if they could send me a miracle. "Please," I begged. "Please let someone find me before I close my eyes forever." And on the 4th morning, when I thought I would never wake again, I saw him, the stranger. He wasn't from my village. I had never seen him before. His clothes were dusty, and he looked like he had been traveling a long way. But his eyes were full of pity and kindness. He reached for me, his voice shaking as he said, "Who did this to you, child?" I couldn't speak, but my tears answered him. He pulled out a knife from his pocket and began to cut the ropes. My heart raced with hope. Was this the miracle I had begged for? But then, before the ropes could fall, the sound of heavy footsteps came crashing through the silence. My father's shadow loomed over us, darker than ever. What do you think will happen now that my father has returned and caught the stranger trying to save me? Will he let me go, or will things get even worse? Don't miss the next chapter, because the story is only getting darker and more shocking from here. Stay tuned. The knife in the stranger's hand froze mid-air as my father's heavy footsteps pounded closer. I could see the anger blazing in his eyes even before he reached us. My heart stopped. For a moment, I thought the stranger would run, like everyone else always did when they saw my father. But he didn't. He stood firm, his tall figure shielding me as though he had known me all his life. My father's voice was like thunder. What do you think you're doing with my child? His fists clenched, and his jaw tightened. The stranger turned his head slightly, his voice calm but strong. This is not how you treat your daughter. She's starving, weak, and dying. You can't leave her here like this. For a second, silence filled the air. Then my father let out a laugh, bitter and sharp. You have no right to tell me how to raise my child. Leave now if you care for your life. The stranger hesitated, glancing at me, and I felt his grip on the ropes tighten. Hope flared inside me, but fear crashed over it like a wave. Would he leave me too? My father stepped forward, his shadow swallowing both of us. His eyes narrowed at the knife, and I could see violence in his gaze. He wasn't afraid of this man. He wasn't afraid of anyone. The stranger's hand trembled slightly, but then he did something that shocked me. He began to cut faster. The ropes snapped one by one. I gasped as my arms fell free, aching and numb, but my father's roar filled the air. Before I could even stand, his hand struck the stranger hard across the face. The man staggered but didn't fall. Instead, he stood his ground. You will not touch her again, my father shouted. She is mine to do with as I please. The stranger's voice was low but steady. No child belongs to pain. If you don't want her, then I will take her. For the first time in my life, someone spoke against my father. My heart pounded in my chest. Could it be true? Could this man take me away? But my father was not about to give up his control so easily. His fists balled, and he lunged forward. The stranger pushed me gently behind him, and the two men clashed in front of me. Fists flew, dust rose, and the sound of their struggle echoed through the empty yard. I wanted to scream, but my voice was too weak. My body trembled, half from fear and half from hunger. I sank to the ground, clutching my sore wrists, and watched the battle unfold. The fight didn't last long. My father was strong, but the stranger had the strength of someone fighting for more than himself. He knocked my father down, and for a moment, I thought it was over. But my father spat on the ground, glaring at us with pure hatred. This isn't finished, he growled. Then he turned and stormed away, his steps heavy with rage. The stranger knelt beside me, his face soft with concern. Blood trickled from his lip where my father had hit him, but he smiled anyway. It's all right now. You're safe. I wanted to believe him. Safe. The word sounded strange, almost like a dream. I hadn't known safety since I was born. He lifted me gently into his arms. My body felt weightless, like a rag doll, and I realized just how close I had been to death. As he carried me away from the fence, I saw my mother watching from the doorway. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't move, didn't say a word. My heart ached, but I understood. She was too afraid of my father. The stranger carried me to a small hut at the edge of the village. He laid me on a mat and rushed to fetch water. When the first drops touched my lips, I almost cried from relief. The water was cool, sweet, and life itself. He gave me only a little at first so I wouldn't choke. Then he brought me food, a piece of bread and some boiled yam. I ate slowly, each bite like a gift. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I whispered, "Thank you." He smiled. "My name is David. I was just passing through this village, but I think God sent me here for a reason." I held on to his words. A reason. Maybe my suffering wasn't the end of my story after all. The next few days were like a new world. David stayed in the village, helping me grow strong again. He taught me to walk after my legs had almost forgotten how to move. He spoke to me kindly, never raising his hand, never shouting. It felt strange at first, but slowly, I began to trust him. But not everyone was happy. My father's anger spread like fire. He shouted in the streets that I was his child and no one had the right to take me away. Some villagers whispered behind their hands, afraid of him but also shocked at what he had done to me. My mother visited me once in secret. She knelt beside me, holding my hands tightly. "I'm sorry, Grace," she whispered, her tears soaking my palms. "I couldn't help you. I wanted to, but—" Her voice broke and she looked away. "I don't blame you, Mama," I said softly, though inside my heart burned with questions. Why didn't she stop him? Why did she let it happen? But I swallowed my pain. I only had strength for survival. Days turned into weeks, and David spoke of taking me far from the village, to a town where I could live without fear. For the first time, I began to dream of a future. School, friends, laughter. Things I had only seen in my imagination. But the shadow of my father never left. He followed us with his glare whenever we crossed paths. I knew he was waiting, planning something. And then, one night it happened. I woke to the sound of footsteps outside the hut. At first, I thought it was David returning from fetching water. But the footsteps were heavier, angrier. My heart froze. The door slammed open, and there he was. My father, holding a long stick in his hand, his eyes wild with rage. "You think you can steal my daughter from me?" he shouted. His voice shook the walls. "Tonight, I will end this once and for all." The stick in my father's hand glistened under the dim moonlight pouring through the hut's open doorway. His breathing was heavy, his eyes burning like fire. I froze on the mat, my body trembling with fear. For a moment, I thought my heart had stopped beating. This was it. This was the night my father would finish what he started at the fence. David rose quickly from the corner where he had been resting. His body blocked mine once again, just like the day he first found me. "Henry," he said firmly, calling my father by name. "Put the stick down. Don't make this worse." My father sneered. "Worse? You think you know worse? This girl is my blood. I decide what to do with her. And you," his voice shook with fury, "you're nothing but a stranger meddling in things you don't understand." The stick swung through the air, aiming for David's head. I screamed, my voice piercing the silence. But David caught the blow with his arm, grunting in pain as the stick cracked against his flesh. "Run, Grace," David shouted, his voice strong despite the pain. But my legs wouldn't move. My mind screamed at me to flee, but my body was rooted to the mat, paralyzed by fear. I could only watch as the two men struggled, their shadows twisting in the flickering light of the oil lamp. My father's strength was fueled by rage, but David's was driven by something deeper, determination. He fought not for himself but for me. Blow after blow landed, each one echoing like thunder in the tiny hut. Finally, with one powerful shove, David pushed my father back. My father stumbled against the wall, his stick clattering to the floor. For a heartbeat, silence filled the air. Then David picked up the stick and threw it out of the hut. "You will not touch her again," David said, his voice low but commanding. For the first time in my life, I saw my father hesitate. His eyes flickered, not with guilt, but with recognition. He knew this fight wasn't his to win. With a growl, he spat on the floor and stormed out into the night. I collapsed into sobs, my body shaking uncontrollably. David knelt beside me, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. "It's all right," he whispered. "He's gone for now." But I knew better. My father wasn't finished. He never was. The following morning, the village buzzed with whispers. Word of the fight had spread quickly, carried from one mouth to another like wildfire. Some villagers nodded in quiet approval, their eyes glancing at me with pity. Others shook their heads, afraid of what my father might do next. David helped me wash my wounds, fed me, and tried to calm my fears. But I could see the worry etched into his face. "We can't stay here much longer," he said one evening. "Your father won't stop. He will come again. We need to leave this village." The thought of leaving scared me. This was the only home I had ever known, despite its cruelty. The trees, the river, even the dusty paths, I had grown up with them. But then I remembered the fence, the hunger, the rope biting into my skin. I remembered the hatred in my father's eyes. Maybe leaving was the only way to live. Still, my heart ached for my mother. Every night I thought of her, alone in that house, still under my father's rule. Did she miss me? Did she blame herself? Or was she relieved I was gone? One evening, I decided to see her. David was against it, but I begged until he agreed to accompany me. We crept through the shadows, careful not to be seen. My mother met us at the back of the house, her eyes swollen from crying. She hugged me tightly, her thin arms shaking. "Grace," she whispered. "I thought I'd lost you." "I'm alive, Mama," I said, tears streaming down my face. "But I can't stay. He'll kill me if I do." Her lips trembled. "I know," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. I wish I had the strength to leave too. I wanted to beg her to come with us, but I knew the fear that held her captive. She wasn't ready. So I just squeezed her hand and promised, "One day, I'll come back for you." That was the last time I saw her face in that place. The next morning, David prepared for our journey. He gathered food, water, and a few blankets. The plan was to leave before dawn, when the village was still asleep. My heart beat fast with both fear and excitement. Maybe, just maybe, I had a chance at freedom. But my father was always one step ahead. That night, as the moon climbed high, we heard a commotion outside the hut. Shouts, footsteps, angry voices. David peeked through the small window, his jaw tightening. "He's coming, with others." My blood ran cold. My father wasn't alone this time. He had gathered men from the village, men too afraid of him to say no. They carried torches, their flames flickering in the darkness like angry spirits. "They want to take you back," David said, his voice urgent. "We have to move now." But before we could slip out the back, the door burst open. My father stood there, his face twisted with triumph. Behind him, the men filled the doorway, their shadows long and menacing. "You thought you could run from me," he snarled, stepping forward. "Tonight, this ends." The torchlight filled the hut, casting wild shadows on the walls. I clutched David's hand, my heart racing so fast I thought it would explode. Then my father lifted his arm, and I saw the glint of a long knife in his hand. The knife gleamed in my father's hand, its sharp edge reflecting the firelight from the villagers' torches. My breath caught in my throat. The walls of the small hut seemed to close in around us, trapping me in a nightmare I couldn't escape. "Henry, stop this madness." David's voice was calm but firm, though I could see the fear in his eyes. He positioned himself between me and my father once again. My father's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Step aside, stranger. You don't understand. This girl has shamed me. She belongs to me, and I will decide her fate." The villagers behind him shifted uneasily, their eyes darting between the three of us. Some looked ashamed, others frightened, but none dared to challenge him. They were prisoners of his power just as much as my mother had been. David's voice rang out. No child belongs to pain. You've beaten her, starved her, tied her to a fence like an animal. Enough is enough. If you want to get to her, you'll have to go through me. The air was thick with silence. My father's eyes burned with rage as he raised the knife and lunged forward. I screamed. The blade slashed downward, but David caught my father's wrist mid-swing. The knife trembled between them as they struggled, sweat dripping from their brows. The villagers gasped, their torches flickering as they shuffled nervously. "Help me!" my father shouted at them. "She is mine." But no one moved. They stood frozen, watching the battle unfold, too afraid to interfere. With a sudden burst of strength, David twisted my father's wrist. The knife clattered to the floor, skidding across the dirt. He kicked it away, far from my father's reach. Fury erupted from my father's throat as he tackled David to the ground. They rolled across the hut, fists flying, grunts filling the air. I pressed myself against the wall, my hands trembling, my heart slamming in my chest. It felt like hours before David finally gained the upper hand. He pinned my father to the floor, his voice ragged but steady. "Leave her alone, Henry. This ends now." For a moment, I thought it was over. My father's chest rose and fell heavily, his face twisted with hatred. Then he spat up at David, his words dripping with venom. "You think you've won? You've only made it worse." David's jaw tightened, but he didn't release him. The villagers muttered among themselves, their fear turning into doubt. For the first time, they saw my father's cruelty laid bare. One man stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Henry, maybe you've gone too far." The others murmured in agreement. My father's eyes widened with disbelief as he realized the crowd was slipping from his grasp. "This is not over," he growled, his voice hoarse. "She will always be mine." David finally let him go, pushing him toward the door. My father stumbled to his feet, glaring at me with a look that pierced my soul. Then he stormed out, the villagers following slowly behind him. The hut fell into silence, the only sound my shaky breaths. David turned to me, his face pale but determined. "We can't wait any longer. We're leaving tonight." The night was dark, the stars hidden behind thick clouds. David packed quickly, gathering what little food and water we had left. My hands shook as I tied the small bundle he gave me. My legs still felt weak, but fear pushed me forward. "Stay close to me," David whispered as we slipped out of the hut. "Don't look back." We crept through the village, moving like shadows among the huts. Every creak, every rustle of leaves made my heart jump. I half expected my father to leap out at any moment, knife in hand. When we reached the edge of the village, I looked back one last time. I saw the faint glow of torches, the outline of the house where my mother slept. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to turn away. Freedom lay ahead, not behind. The journey was hard. My body was weak from the days of starvation, and the path was rough. David carried me when I could no longer walk, his arms strong though I could feel his exhaustion. During the day, we hid among the trees to avoid being seen. At night, we walked under the cover of darkness. The air was cold, and the forest echoed with strange sounds, owls, insects, and sometimes distant howls that sent shivers down my spine. But despite the fear, a strange hope burned inside me. For the first time, I was far from my father's reach. Each step carried me closer to a life I had only dared to dream of. One evening, as we rested by a small stream, David handed me a piece of roasted yam. I chewed slowly, savoring every bite. "You're stronger than you know, Grace," he said softly. "Most people would have given up after what you went through. But not you. You survived. Tears welled in my eyes. I only survived because of you. He shook his head. No. The miracle was that you held on long enough for me to find you. Don't ever forget your strength. His words sank deep into my heart. Maybe he was right. Maybe I wasn't just a victim. Maybe I had a purpose. But just as hope began to grow, fear returned. On the 5th night of our journey, as we made camp under a cluster of trees, I heard it, the snap of a branch, the rustle of leaves. David froze, his eyes narrowing. "Stay behind me," he whispered, reaching for a thick stick by the fire. My heart pounded as shadows moved among the trees. Then I saw him. My father. He stepped into the firelight, his face twisted with rage, his clothes torn from travel. Behind him were two men I didn't recognize, both carrying sticks. "You thought you could run from me," he hissed, his eyes fixed on me. "You are mine, Grace. And tonight you come home." David raised the stick, his body tense and ready. Over my dead body. The fire crackled, the night air heavy with tension. My father's grip tightened on the weapon in his hand as he stepped closer. And then, with a roar, he lunged straight at us. The firelight flickered wildly as my father lunged forward, his face twisted with fury. The two men behind him charged too, their sticks raised high. My scream pierced the night as David swung his own stick, blocking the first blow. The crack of wood against wood echoed in the forest like thunder. "Run, Grace," David shouted, his voice breaking with urgency. But my legs felt like they were glued to the ground. I couldn't leave him. I couldn't let him fight three men alone. My heart pounded so loudly I could hardly hear the chaos around me. The first man swung at David's head, but David ducked, his stick slamming into the man's side. The man cried out and stumbled, but the second attacker rushed forward, striking David hard on the back. David grunted, falling to one knee. My father laughed, a horrible sound that chilled my blood. "You can't save her, stranger. She's mine." "No," I cried, my voice shaking. "I'm not yours." The words slipped out before I could stop them. My father's eyes burned hotter than the flames. He charged straight at me, his stick raised to strike. I screamed and fell back, my hands covering my head. But before the blow could land, David leaped between us, his body shielding mine. The stick cracked across his shoulder, and he staggered. "Go!" he gasped, his voice weak but desperate. "Please, Grace, run." I stumbled to my feet, my heart torn in two. Every step away from him felt like a betrayal. But I knew if I stayed, we would both die. With tears blinding my eyes, I turned and ran into the darkness of the forest. Branches scratched my arms and legs as I pushed through the thick trees. My breath came in sharp gasps, my chest burning. Behind me, I heard the clash of sticks, the shouts of men, and then, a terrible silence. I stopped, my whole body trembling. "David," I whispered into the darkness. No answer. Panic rose in my throat. I wanted to run back, but fear held me still. What if my father had killed him? What if they were waiting for me to return? My knees gave way, and I collapsed against a tree, sobbing quietly. The night pressed in around me, cold and unforgiving. The forest felt alive, every rustle and crack making me flinch. I wrapped my arms around myself, rocking back and forth. Alone. For the first time since David had saved me, I was truly alone. But then, through the silence, I heard it, a groan, weak but real. My heart leapt. "David," I whispered, forcing myself to my feet. I followed the sound, creeping carefully through the shadows. My legs shook, but I pushed forward until I saw him. He was lying on the ground near the fire, blood trickling from his forehead. The two men were gone, but my father was nowhere to be seen either. Relief washed over me as I knelt beside him. "David, it's me," I whispered, pressing my hand against his shoulder. His eyes fluttered open, and he managed a faint smile. "You came back." "I couldn't leave you," I said, tears spilling down my face. He coughed, wincing in pain. They ran off. Your father too. But he'll be back. He won't stop." His words cut into me like the cold night air. I knew he was right. My father was like a storm that refused to pass. The next morning, David was too weak to walk far. I helped him as best as I could, supporting his weight with my thin arms. We moved slowly, stopping often to rest. My stomach growled with hunger, but food was scarce. The little we had left was gone, and the forest offered nothing but bitter berries I didn't dare eat. Still, I didn't give up. Each time David stumbled, I pulled him back up. Each time he said I should leave him behind, I shook my head fiercely. No. We stay together. We followed the sound of water until we found a river. Its surface sparkled in the sunlight, and I knelt to drink greedily, the coolness reviving me. David drank too, his face pale but grateful. For a moment, hope returned. Maybe if we followed the river, it would lead us to a village, a safe place where my father couldn't find us. But fate had other plans. That evening, as we walked along the riverbank, I spotted movement across the water. My heart froze. There he was again. My father, standing tall with a cruel smile on his face. "You thought you could run forever," he called across the rushing water. His voice carried easily, slicing through the air like a blade. David's arm tightened around my shoulder. "Stay behind me," he murmured. But my father wasn't alone. Behind him were more men, for this time, their faces stern and unfriendly. They carried sticks and ropes. "This time," my father shouted, "you won't escape." Fear surged through me, stronger than ever before. My legs shook so badly I thought I might fall. The river rushed between us, but I knew it was only a matter of time before they crossed. David's grip on the stick tightened. His face was pale, his body weak, but his eyes burned with determination. "Grace," he whispered, "if they catch us, don't fight them. Wait for a chance. Remember, you're stronger than you think." I nodded, though my heart screamed in terror. Then the men stepped into the water, their torches high, their eyes locked on us. My father led them, his voice dripping with triumph. The river roared, the sky darkened, and I clutched David's arm as the men waded closer and closer. And then, just as they reached the middle of the river, something unexpected happened. The current grew stronger, pulling at their legs. The water rose suddenly, as if the river itself was angry. One man slipped, his torch falling into the water with a hiss. Another cried out as the current dragged him off his feet. My father shouted in fury, struggling to stay upright. The river was turning against them. Life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. Grace's journey reminds us that no matter how dark the night gets, there is always a light waiting to break through. If this story moved your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs courage today. And if you believe every storm eventually runs out of rain, let your voice be heard in the comments. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The sharp sound of chains rattling against the iron fence cut through the still night air. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest as I realized the noise was coming from my own wrists. The shackles were loosening. But before relief could wash over me, the silence was shattered by the furious roar of my father. "There you are." His voice was raw, full of venom, like a beast that had been hunting its prey for hours and finally found it. I turned my head, my breath catching in my throat. In his hand, father held a torch, the flames crackling angrily, lighting up the dark corners of the yard. The fire's glow revealed the rage on his face, eyes bloodshot, lips curled back in a snarl. For the first time, I wasn't just afraid. I was certain he intended to end me right then and there. Behind him, the two men he had brought earlier stepped forward, carrying the same shovels. Only this time, they weren't just digging. They were dragging something heavy behind them, a wooden box. The sight of it made my blood run cold. I didn't need anyone to explain. That box was meant for me. My father raised the torch high above his head. "This ends tonight," he shouted. "No more shame. No more curse in my house." I screamed, my voice echoing into the darkness, but the neighbors were too far to hear, or maybe too afraid to interfere. My arms strained desperately against the weakened shackles, and I felt the rusted metal scrape into my skin. And then, it happened. The chain snapped. I tumbled forward, crashing onto the dirt. My body was weak, my legs trembling, but the sudden freedom filled me with a spark of wild energy. For the first time in days, I wasn't tied. For the first time I had a chance. But father saw it too. "Catch her," he roared. The two men dropped the box and lunged toward me. I scrambled to my feet, my bare toes digging into the cold earth, and ran. My legs wobbled, every step painful, but fear pushed me faster than I thought possible. The night swallowed me whole as I fled toward the woods. The trees loomed ahead like a wall of shadows, but I had no choice. Branches clawed at my arms as I pushed through, my breath burning in my chest. Behind me, I could hear them crashing through the undergrowth, shouting, their footsteps pounding like drums of doom. I wanted to scream for help, but I knew it would only give away my location. So I forced myself to stay silent, even as tears streamed down my face. Minutes felt like hours as I darted deeper into the forest. Finally, I collapsed behind a fallen log, clutching my chest and praying they hadn't seen me. My body trembled violently, and I bit my lip to stop myself from making a sound. The men's voices grew louder. "She can't be far," one of them growled. "We'll find her," the other hissed. I pressed my hand over my mouth, trying not to breathe too loudly. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would give me away. The torchlight flickered between the trees, growing closer and closer until it nearly lit up the log where I hid. I shut my eyes tight and whispered inside my head, "God, please, don't let them find me." And then, just as the light hovered inches away, a rustling sound came from the opposite side of the woods. The men stopped. "What was that?" one asked. "Over there," the other shouted. They ran toward the sound, their footsteps crashing through the brush. The torchlight disappeared with them, leaving me in darkness once again. I gasped quietly, relief flooding my body. But then I froze. The sound hadn't been random. Someone else was in the woods. I slowly lifted my head, and my eyes widened in shock. Standing a few feet away, barely visible in the pale moonlight, was Thomas, the same stranger who had tried to save me before. "Grace," he whispered urgently, crouching down beside me. "Get up. We don't have much time." I stared at him in disbelief. Why did you come back?" He gave me a quick, almost sad smile. "Because I couldn't leave you to die." Before I could say anything more, he took my arm gently and pulled me to my feet. My legs were still shaking, but his steady grip gave me strength. Together, we moved quickly through the woods, careful not to make noise. But just when I thought we were safe, a chilling sound echoed behind us, the furious roar of my father. "Grace." The ground trembled beneath his voice, and the torchlight flared again through the trees. He had found our trail. Panic surged through me, and I clutched Thomas's arm tighter. We ran faster, dodging roots and branches, every step a battle against exhaustion. My lungs burned, my vision blurred, but I refused to stop. Because if father caught me now, there would be no second chance. And then, ahead of us, the forest opened into a clearing. At its center stood an old wooden cabin, smoke curling faintly from the chimney. Thomas pulled me toward it. "We'll be safe in there," he said. But before we reached the door, a sharp crack split the night. I gasped, clutching my side. For a moment, I didn't understand. Then I felt it, the hot sting of pain. My father had fired his gun, and the bullet had found me. The world spun as I crumpled to the ground, my hands pressing instinctively against the burning hole in my side. Warm blood seeped through my fingers, staining them deep red. My breath came out in short, sharp gasps, every inhale slicing my lungs like knives. I heard Thomas shout my name. His arms were around me in an instant, pulling me close, his face etched with terror. "Grace, stay with me. Don't you close your eyes." But my vision was blurring. The night sky above seemed to ripple, the stars dancing in strange patterns. My body wanted to give up, to sink into the earth and let the pain fade away. Behind us, Father's voice rang out like thunder. "You think you can take her from me?" His footsteps pounded closer, the torchlight bouncing wildly as he stormed through the clearing. "She belongs to me. She will die as I command." Thomas gritted his teeth. With one arm, he lifted me from the ground, carrying me toward the cabin door. His muscles strained under my weight, but he refused to let me go. He slammed his shoulder against the wooden door, it cracked open, and he stumbled inside with me. The cabin smelled of smoke and herbs. A lantern flickered weakly on a rough wooden table. An old woman sat in the corner, her eyes widening in alarm as we burst in. "What in heaven's name?" she gasped, rushing toward us. "She's been shot," Thomas cried. He laid me down on a cot, his hands shaking. "Please, help her. I can't lose her now." The old woman didn't waste time with questions. She grabbed a bowl, poured hot water, and tore a strip of cloth from her apron. "Hold her still," she ordered. Thomas held me down as she pressed the cloth against my wound. I screamed, the pain ripping through me like fire. Tears streamed down my face, my nails clawing at the blanket beneath me. The woman worked quickly, her hands steady even as mine trembled uncontrollably. "You're lucky," she muttered. "The bullet passed through. If it had lodged inside, you'd be gone already." Through the haze of agony, her words were a faint thread of hope. But then the cabin shook violently. Father had reached the door. "Open up," he roared, pounding his fists against the wood. "Give me my daughter or I'll burn this place to the ground." The old woman's eyes flashed with fear. "That man is mad," she whispered. "If he sets fire to this cabin, we'll all be trapped." Thomas turned to her. "Is there another way out?" "A trapdoor," she said quickly, pointing to the floorboards. "Leads to the root cellar. From there, the woods." Thomas nodded and bent down, ripping open the trapdoor. Cold, damp air rose from the dark hole. Without hesitation, he lifted me gently in his arms again. My body felt like lead, but his grip was strong, determined. The old woman pressed a small pouch into his hand. "Take this. Herbs to stop the bleeding. I'll hold him off as long as I can." "No," Thomas protested, his eyes wide. "He'll kill you." She shook her head firmly. "I've lived long enough. Go. Save the girl." Before either of us could argue, the door splintered under Father's furious blows. Thomas disappeared into the trapdoor with me, just as flames from the torch licked at the doorway. We stumbled into the root cellar, pitch black except for a faint shaft of moonlight filtering through cracks in the wooden wall. My breathing was ragged, every step jostling the wound in my side. But Thomas didn't stop. He kicked open a panel, and suddenly we were outside again, the night air cold and sharp against my fevered skin. Behind us, the cabin groaned as flames swallowed it whole. The old woman's voice rose in a defiant scream, then was lost to the roar of fire. I wanted to cry out, to beg Thomas to go back for her, But I didn't have the strength. My body sagged against him, my consciousness flickering like a candle in the wind. We ran deeper into the forest, the firelight fading behind us. My father's furious shouts echoed faintly, but we were gaining distance. For the first time I thought maybe, just maybe, we could escape. Thomas finally slowed, lowering me beside a stream. He ripped open the pouch the woman had given him, pulling out dried leaves and powder. He soaked the herbs in water and pressed them against my wound. The sting was unbearable. I arched my back and screamed, my nails digging into the earth. But slowly, miraculously, the bleeding eased. My body shivered violently, but I could breathe again without choking on pain. Thomas sat beside me, his face pale with exhaustion. "You're going to make it," he whispered, brushing damp hair from my forehead. "I swear it, Grace. I'll protect you, even if it kills me." His words touched something deep inside me. No one had ever spoken like that to me before. No one had ever cared if I lived or died. But before I could even whisper a reply, the sound of footsteps echoed through the trees again. Closer. Heavier. Thomas's eyes went wide. He grabbed my hand and pulled me up gently. "We have to move." I staggered to my feet, leaning against him for support. Together, we stumbled through the underbrush, the moonlight guiding our path. My body screamed with pain, but fear pushed me forward. And then, suddenly, we burst into a small clearing, and froze. Standing in the center was my father. His torch was gone, but in his hand gleamed the cold steel of a knife. His face was lit by moonlight, twisted with madness, his smile stretching unnaturally wide. "I told you," he said softly, his voice like poison. "No one takes what belongs to me." He took a step forward. Then another. The knife caught the moonlight, flashing like a deadly star. Thomas stepped in front of me, his fists clenched, his body trembling, but not with fear. With fury. "Then you'll have to kill me first," Thomas said. The night froze. My father lunged forward, the knife raised high. And I screamed as steel and flesh collided in the darkness. The sound of steel sinking into flesh split the night, followed by a guttural groan that made my knees buckle. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Then I saw it. The knife was buried deep, not in Thomas, but in my father's own arm. Thomas had grabbed his wrist at the last second and twisted, turning the blade back against him. Blood poured down his sleeve, glistening black under the moonlight. Father staggered backward, snarling like a wounded animal. You dare." Thomas didn't wait. With a swift motion, he shoved father away and planted himself firmly between us. His chest rose and fell with rage, his fists clenched, ready for another attack. But my father only laughed, even as blood dripped onto the dirt. "You think you've won, boy?" His voice was sharp, cutting through the forest. "This girl is cursed. Saving her will destroy you too." The words sent a chill crawling up my spine. He had called me cursed so many times that part of me wondered if he was right. If I truly brought ruin to everyone who tried to love me. But Thomas didn't falter. He stepped closer to father, his eyes blazing. "She isn't cursed. She's a victim. And tonight, the abuse ends." Father's smile vanished. With a roar, he charged again, swinging the knife wildly despite his injured arm. Thomas dodged, striking his wrist with a force that made the blade fly from his hand. It clattered against a rock and slid into the shadows. For the first time, father looked uncertain. He stumbled, clutching his wound. His eyes darted between Thomas and me, and something dark flickered in them. Fear. He took a step back. Then another. Finally, without another word, he turned and disappeared into the forest, his retreat swallowed by the night. My body collapsed against the ground in relief. Tears welled up in my eyes, my chest heaving. I had never seen my father retreat before. Never. Thomas crouched beside me, his hands trembling. "He's gone," he whispered, almost like he couldn't believe it himself. "You're safe now." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to let those words sink into my bones and heal the wounds left by years of pain. But deep down, I knew the truth. My father would not give up so easily. The silence of the clearing pressed in on us. Only the distant rustle of leaves and the faint croak of frogs filled the air. The adrenaline drained from my body, leaving me weak and shivering. Thomas gently helped me up and guided me to the stream again. He washed the dried blood from my side, reapplied the herbs, and tore a strip from his own shirt to bind the wound tighter. His hands were careful, his eyes focused, as if his whole world depended on keeping me alive. When he finished, he sat back, breathing heavily. "You need rest," he said softly. "But we can't stay here. If he comes back with others, we won't survive." I nodded weakly, though every muscle in my body screamed with exhaustion. The thought of moving again felt impossible. Still, I leaned on him, trusting his strength. Together, we walked through the forest until the first gray light of dawn crept across the horizon. Birds began to sing, their voices bright and innocent, a cruel contrast to the nightmare we were living. By mid-morning, we stumbled into a small village. My knees nearly buckled when I saw it. Houses built of mud and straw, smoke rising from cooking fires, children running barefoot across the dusty paths. Thomas guided me to the edge of the village, where an old man sat weaving a basket. The man's eyes narrowed as he saw us approach. "You don't belong here," he said gruffly. Thomas bowed his head respectfully. "Please, sir. We mean no harm. She's been hurt. She needs help." The old man's gaze softened slightly when he saw the blood on my clothes. He sighed and gestured toward a hut nearby. "Go inside. My wife will tend to her. But know this, you cannot stay long. Trouble follows the wounded, and my people fear danger." Inside the hut, a woman with kind eyes helped me lie down on a mat. She brought me warm broth and pressed cool cloths against my forehead. For the first time in days, I tasted food, and though it was only a small sip, it felt like heaven sliding down my throat. I drifted in and out of sleep, my body finally surrendering to rest. When I woke, the sun was lower in the sky. Thomas sat beside me, his head resting against the wall, his face weary but watchful. "Why are you doing this for me?" I whispered. My voice cracked, the question raw and desperate. He looked at me, his eyes full of something I couldn't name. "Because no one else would. And because I believe you deserve more than pain." His words pierced me deeper than any wound. For a moment, I wanted to believe him, to trust that maybe I wasn't cursed after all. But just as that fragile hope began to form, a scream echoed from outside the hut. We jolted upright. The village erupted in chaos. Children crying, women shouting, men grabbing sticks and spears. Heavy footsteps thundered against the ground. And then I heard it. My father's voice. "You can't hide her from me," he bellowed, his fury shaking the air. "She is mine. And anyone who stands in my way will die." My blood ran cold. Thomas grabbed my hand, his grip firm. His eyes locked onto mine with fierce determination. "Grace, this is it. We can't run anymore. We have to face him." The door to the hut creaked open, and the shadow of my father stretched long across the floor. His knife gleamed once more in his hand. And this time, there would be no running. The sun had just risen, casting its warm light across the small village, yet my heart was heavy with fear. My father had been taken away by the police, but deep inside, I still felt like his shadow lingered around me. It was as though his voice was whispering threats into my ears, warning me that I could never truly be free. I tried to shake the feeling, but it clung to me like a second skin. Even though I was safe with the kind stranger who had rescued me from the fence, nightmares haunted my nights. I would wake up trembling, the taste of dust still in my mouth, hearing the echo of chains rattling and my father's cruel laugh. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw myself tied again, helpless and starving. One evening, as I sat by the fire in the stranger's small home, I asked him, "Do you think I will ever stop being afraid?" He looked at me with gentle eyes and said, "Fear is like a shadow, Grace. It will follow you for a while, but with courage and love, you will learn to walk in the light. And shadows cannot live in the light." His words gave me a spark of hope, though my heart was still scarred. But life was not ready to be calm yet. The stranger's home, though safe, was poor. He had little food and worked hard each day. I tried to help him by fetching water, cooking simple meals, and tending to his goats. We became like family. Yet whispers spread in the village. Some said I was cursed, others said I brought danger. People were afraid of my father's rage even though he was gone. One afternoon, while walking back from the river with a pot of water balanced on my head, I heard angry voices. A group of villagers stood in a circle, talking loudly. "Her father may be gone," one woman hissed, "but his evil lives in her. Misfortune follows that child. She should be sent away before she brings more sorrow," another shouted. Their words stabbed my heart like knives. I dropped the pot, water spilling into the dirt, and ran until my feet could no longer carry me. I fell to the ground, weeping. Why was I being punished for crimes I did not commit? That night, the stranger comforted me. "Grace, you are not your father. His evil cannot stain your soul. People fear what they do not understand. But listen to me. Your survival is proof that you carry something greater than fear. You carry a miracle." His words burned into me like fire. A miracle. Could I really believe that? The next morning, a storm struck the village. The wind howled, tearing at rooftops, and rain poured down like the heavens themselves were crying. I huddled with the stranger inside his small hut as thunder shook the sky. Suddenly, we heard screams outside. A tree had fallen near the marketplace, trapping several children beneath its heavy branches. Without thinking, I ran into the storm. My feet sank into the mud as the rain blinded my eyes. The children's cries pierced my ears. Villagers stood frozen, too afraid to act, but I crawled under the branches and began pulling at the wood with all my strength. My arms burned, my body shook, but I would not stop. "Help me," I cried. At last, others joined, and together we freed the children. One by one, we carried them to safety. The storm still roared, but in that moment, all I felt was light. When the storm passed, the villagers looked at me with new eyes. The same woman who had cursed me before whispered, "She saved them. That girl is not cursed, she is blessed." For the first time, I felt truly seen. My past no longer chained me. I had been tied to a fence, left to die, but I survived. And now, I had saved others. But just when I thought peace had come, a final shock awaited me. One evening, a letter arrived. It was from the prison. My father had escaped. The words blurred before my eyes as I clutched the paper in my trembling hands. My breath caught in my throat. Could it be true? Was the nightmare returning to haunt me? The stranger took the letter gently from me. His jaw tightened, but his voice was steady. "Grace, no matter what happens, you are no longer that weak child tied to a fence. You are stronger than the darkness that tried to destroy you. If he comes, you will not face him alone." Yet deep in my heart, I knew this was not the end. My father was out there, and fate was preparing one last battle. And so I sat beneath the moonlight that night, whispering a prayer to the heavens. If the man who gave me life comes back to take it again, give me the strength to stand. I am no longer afraid. The wind blew softly through the trees, carrying with it both fear and hope. My story was not finished, because the miracle that saved me once might be needed again. Grace's story teaches us that even when the people who should love us the most turn into the source of our deepest pain, we can still rise above it. Darkness may try to chain us, but courage and kindness can break every chain. No matter where you come from or what you've been through, you are not defined by the cruelty of others. You are defined by the strength to survive, the will to keep moving, and the heart to choose light over hate.